Hello, I'm Brian E. Denton, author of the book A Year of War and Peace and the poetry collection Inspiration. Welcome to my channel. In this series of videos, I propose to read through Dante's Divine Comedy, with anyone who cares to join me, at a rate of 1 canto per session. The idea to do this was inspired by Baylor University's 100 Days of Dante Project. And the 100 Days of Dante Project, what Baylor University proposes to do, is read through Dante's Divine Comedy at the rate of 3 cantos per week. I think that this is a great idea that they have here. Dante's Divine Comedy is one of the great pieces of world literature. It's a piece of world literature that I've read semi-regularly over the years. I've read it many, many times. I find it very profitable, very enjoyable, and very deep and profound, and I think you will too. And that's why I invite you to join me on my reading of this. I mean, it's one of those great immortal pieces of Italian artwork. It's right up there with Michelangelo's The Sistine Chapel, Boccaccio's The Decameron, and of course David Chase's The Sopranos. So in these videos, what I propose to do is essentially break it down into 2 different parts. A quick synopsis, where I will talk about what happened in the canto, and then maybe also a little bit about the characters and what they're going through and whatnot. And then the second part, I'll offer my own thoughts on the canto. Usually I'm going to be reading syntopically. And if you don't know what it means to read syntopically, syntopic pretty much just means in conversation with. And for those of you not familiar with the word, it comes from Mortimer Adler's great book, How to Read a Book, where he says that one should always read a book in conversations with others. Ask where they agree with each other, where they disagree with each other, how they're in dialogue with one another. I think it's one of the best ways to read literature, and I think you will too after you do so with me, if you decide to join me, which I hope you will. Just real quick, for those who don't know, Dante Alighieri wrote a series of books called The Divine Comedy, and he split these books into 3 parts. The first book is called Inferno, the second book is called Purgatorio, and the third book is called Paradiso. Right. So the first book that we're going to start with, naturally, is the Inferno, and I will be reading from my copy here. This is the verse translation by Robert Hollander and Jean Hollander. Robert Hollander is a great scholar of Dante, and his wife, who helped him with the translation, is a poet. I think that this combination of scholarly fields really provides for an excellent translation. It's my favorite. Although I say it's my favorite, but I've only read 2 different translations, so what the fuck do I know? That said, this is great, and I love it, and I think you'll love it too. Dante is fantastic. And I guess with that, we can just jump right into the first canto of Inferno. We open up with Dante, and he's a man suffering great sufferings. He's having a midlife crisis, and he's alone and lost in a dark wood. It's a really bad dark wood. It's savage, it's dense, it's harsh. And it fills him with fear. It's a very scary place. But there's this hint of dawn with the sun peeping up just over the mountaintop. So Dante walks towards the light. Unfortunately, he's intercepted by 3 wild and crazy beasts, a leopard, a lion, and a she-wolf. These crazy beasts drive him right back down the mountain. Like the leopard drives him down the mountain. The lion drives him down the mountain. Then the she-wolf chases him down the mountain. And then he's back to his midlife despair once again at the bottom of the mountain, so far from the dawning light of the mountaintop. So this makes Dante very, very upset. He's still having his midlife crisis. He's down at the bottom of the mountain, and he's despairing pretty hardcore. In the midst of his sobbing, however, he looks up and he sees a figure. And this figure turns out to be none other than the Latin, pagan, ancient poet Virgil. And Dante recognizes him almost immediately, and he pleads to Virgil for help. And Virgil, he offers Dante help. He says, sure, I'll act as your guide. I'll get you up to the top of the mountain. However, you can't go up that way because it's guarded by these 3 beasts that you may have seen. And indeed, Dante has seen them. So that way's barred. Dante can't get up that way. But Virgil tells him, I can take you through 2 realms to get you up to the light at the mountaintop. The first realm is a realm of great suffering and misery. And there's no hope of relief for the people that you're going to meet there. It's a very, very bad place. The second realm is equally bad. It's full of misery, full of sobbing. But there is hope that one day the people in this realm can eventually attain the bliss of eternal light at the top of the mountain. And after that, there's the third realm, that place at the top of the mountain where there's the light. But I can't go there, says Virgil, because the emperor who rules it has banished me forever because I was a rebel against his laws. Dante accepts this offer of guidance, and the 2 set off, Virgil leading Dante. Okay, so that's my quick synopsis of Canto 1. Let's get right into my 3 takeaways of Canto 1. The first is that Dante wants us to think about finding the universal in the individual. Not finding the universal and the individual, but rather finding the universal in the individual. He makes this clear in the very first line of the poem. Indeed, it's one of the most famous lines in all of world literature. Let's read it. Midway in the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. Let's read that again. Midway in the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. You can see here that Dante is mixing the plural and the singular first person. He's suggesting right off the bat that there is a relationship between the universal and the individual in this world. And you need to keep this in mind throughout your reading, because it's really going to inform a lot of what's going on, not only in the Inferno, but in the following two books as well. And of course, every time that I read this opening line, I'm reminded of that great line by Walt Whitman from Song of Myself, where the poet writes, I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. And that's another opening line, of course, so I think you can read these two poets together. And I think what these two great poets are saying here, and I agree with them, is that though there's a wide and great diversity of human experience, there is also a common shared humanity, which allows us to learn and profit from the experiences of others. Now, the second takeaway is that even from this first canto, there's a tension between the spiritual and the secular. Now, you just can't get away from the fact that Dante's Divine Comedy is a Christian poem. And it goes beyond that. It's not just a Christian poem, it's a medieval Christian poem. And beyond that even, it's not just a medieval Christian poem, it's a medieval Roman Catholic Christian poem. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we contemporaries can't profit from reading this book. I mean, think about it. The poem's been around for over 700 years, and it's been read every single day of those 700 years by many people that do not share similar characteristics or life experiences with Dante, or I guess his original intended audience of medieval Catholic Christians. So I just like to point out that the reason I think that it's been read for so long is that, it has something to offer readers, even contemporaries like us. But getting back to the spiritual and the secular. The spiritual here is, of course, the church, and the secular is the classical world. Dante, I think, the character Dante, not the writer, but maybe the writer too. But Dante, the character, is the one who represents the church. He's a member of the church. He obviously believes in Jesus and the teachings of the church, as we'll see as we go throughout the poem. And on the other hand, we have Virgil. He represents the classical or the secular world. And of course, he's a Latin pagan poet. So you contrast him with the Italian language Christian poet of Dante. I think one thing that really drives home this idea of the tension between the secular and the spiritual in the Divine Comedy is Dante, the character's first word in the entire poem. And that word is miserare. Miserare. Look at that. That's not an Italian word. That's a Latin word. And it's the first word that Dante, the character, speaks. And it's important that it's in Latin and not Italian because, as you may or may not know, it doesn't matter. One of the most famous aspects of Dante's Divine Comedy is that it's one of the first works of literature to be written in the vernacular, that is the Italian, rather than the international church language of the elite, the Latins. So here again, we're contrasting the church, Latin, with the secular Italian. Miserare appears in Canto 1, line 65. And it's a word that's closely associated with the church. In fact, it's the first word in a few of the Psalms in the Latin Vulgate Bible. And these Psalms are used pretty fairly regularly within the Divine Office, which is a series of prayers that Catholics pray every day. And I think one of them, I believe it's Psalm 51, is repeated almost daily in the Divine Office. So you're gonna, if you're praying it, particularly if you're praying the Latin, no matter what Francis wants you to do, you're gonna come across this word, miserare. And it means have mercy, essentially. But miserare is also a secular word. It appears in, you guessed it, Virgil, his Aeneid. And it occurs in Book 2, lines 143 and 144, when Aeneas is telling the story of the sacking of Troy, his own dark wood, if you will. I think there's also something else that is important about having Virgil serve as Dante's guide here. And this is of particular interest to the more contemporary readers who may be more secularist in their outlook rather than religious. And that is that, Virgil, he represents the classical world, and he can be thought of standing in for the humanities, the liberal arts. So what Dante might be saying here is that knowledge of and familiarity with the liberal arts and the humanities can help people navigate their own dark woods and come up towards the light. That's one way those who don't have religious faith could read the poem anyway. That is to say, readers can approach this poem, not only this poem really, but all works of literature, in a bibliotherapeutic fashion. In this sense, Dante agrees with yet another Latin pagan, Seneca, who in his Consolation to Helvia writes the following, quote, "And so I would lead you to the sure refuge of all who fly from fortune, to liberal studies. They will heal your wound. They will eradicate your sadness. Even if you have never been conversant with them before, it would be useful to apply yourself to them now. These studies are the surest safeguards, the only deliverance from the power of fortune." All right, and that takes us to our third and final takeaway from the first canto of Dante's Divine Comedy, Inferno edition. And that takeaway is this. It's the importance of facing adversity with bravery and perseverance. Think about it. In this canto, Dante encounters a great deal of adversity. I mean, he's having his midlife crisis, he's lost in a dark wood, he's got she-wolves chasing him down a mountain when he only wants to get up there to the light to see what the hell's going on. He's very confused. He's generally having a bad time. And yet, even after he's chased down the mountain, even after he's despairing, he decides that he still wants to get to that light. He still wants to seek out the top of the mountain. And in order to get there, right, he accepts the offer of a ghost. Yeah, a ghost of a dead Latin poet, one he loves, but nonetheless a dead ghost. And the ghost, further, he tells him, listen, if you want to get up there to the top of the mountain in the realm of light, you're going to have to go through two different realms that are full of misery, full of pain, full of wailing, and it's going to be a bad, bad time. And what does Dante say? He says, yes, he accepts Virgil's offer. He wants to get to the top of the mountain, and he's willing to persevere and to face adversity with bravery. It's kind of like Joseph de Maistre, that patron saint of reactionaries, when he writes in his St. Petersburg dialogues, "Sufferings are for the virtuous man what battles are for the soldier. They improve him and add to his merits." And with that, I'd just like to say before I conclude here that if you're finding reading the Divine Comedy difficult, if you're not into poetry or epic poetry, which is epically difficult, that you should face this adversity with bravery and perseverance. I think that you'll profit greatly from doing so. And that concludes my synopsis and also the three takeaways, my reading of the canto. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you come back for future vlogs. This should be fun. Reading Dante is a great experience, and it's made better certainly by reading it in community with others. So if you want to read with me, go ahead and click subscribe. Don't forget to like this video, and be sure to share it with your friends. The more the merrier. The 100 Days of Dante reading program by Baylor University is going to update on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So again, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That's 3 cantos a week. It's not a heavy load at all. I think you can do it. And again, I think you're going to love it. I think you're really going to like it. So I'm going to be following that schedule too. I'll be posting also on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I'll see you on Friday then. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.